Whether you're working on the degree or you've just graduated, you're probably wondering what's next.
Well, don't worry. We were wondering exactly the same thing.
From auditions to young artist training programs and beyond, we've been there and we got your back.
This is Between the Notes, real talk for singers chasing the dream.
Hey, Bryan.
Hey, Weston. How you doing, bud?
I'm doing good. Hey, man, listen, I am so glad that we decided to do this podcast Between the Notes together. I think it's going to be a great time.
Absolutely. Why should people even listen to us, right? Like, who are we? Like,
That's a
what
great
do we know?
reason.
Where you been? Like, what's going on? Well, you know, some of you may know us, some of you may not. But we thought that we'd get this kicked off with, it's about singing. This is for opera singers. So we thought we'd show you a little bit of what we do.
Or at least what we've been up to.
Absolutely.
Wow, talk about some memories, right?
Fun times.
I mean, it's great, right? It's like you start momentum and then it grabs and it goes and it goes and it goes and oftentimes you're going from one town to the next town. And you're even rehearsing in the next town before you finish the run of performances in one town.
It's happened, yeah.
And then you go and you collect a little montage of videos that we've done, and it's just like, wow.
It was a nice little walk down memory lane, you know, kind of getting these things together. And, yeah.
Well, so tell me, how did you get into singing in the first place?
Okay, so I got into singing and opera eventually as a child in choir and stuff. But like when it came time to audition for college, I wanted to try and get as much scholarship money as I could. And so I took a couple of lessons. I had been singing, but my voice changed. And then I figured, okay, I'm going to concentrate on piano now. So I took a couple of lessons to get into college, and then was given a nice scholarship to study singing. I mean, I'd done piano, I'd done other stuff, but they were like, "You really deserve it. You know, you deserve to give yourself a shot of taking voice lessons and learning about technique, so that you just see what your voice really can do."
And this is all
So
in New Orleans, right?
this is all in New Orleans,
So you're
absolutely, yeah.
already surrounded by music, right? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I was a jazz trumpet player when I was, and it was pretty good until I got my braces on. Then I was like, not so good anymore. It's
yeah.
just frustrating. It was just frustrating. But and then I concentrated on piano, and then I wanted to be a Broadway conductor. And then they were
This was
like,
all
well,
in like junior high, high school
this is all in
years?
high school, yeah, because I was very fortunate to go to the New Orleans Center for Creative Arts, which was started by Ellis Marsalis of the Marsalis family. He was the
Yeah.
father. And it's a wonderful place. And so I was surrounded by jazz and classical music. And I was there as a classical pianist, but I did sing because, as always, they need guys to help out
Oh, sure.
singing
Yeah.
solos and in the choir and all that jazz. So that's how I did that. And yeah, so that started me off. And after the first year of kind of getting to understand the concept of technique, I was hooked. I was
So where did
really
you go to undergrad?
Loyola University in New Orleans. Yeah,
Okay. All
a
right.
great time. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I had a similar thing. I mean, I didn't.
right,
I grew up in Houston, Texas, and my mom studied voice when she was in college, but took
sure,
the music education route. So she became a junior high and high school choir director,
love
and
it.
so she sort of pushed me, nudged me, forced me into taking choir when I got into high school.
Right,
And I kind of didn't initially fall in love with it, but I certainly loved being surrounded by the music that we were doing.
sure,
My high school choir director didn't play around. We did some legit difficult, challenging repertoire. And again, as a guy, you sort of are immediately in the top choirs as well as the male
right,
ensemble because
right.
they have fewer guys in the choir program. So
Yeah,
I quickly sort of was involved pretty heavily in it, and over time I absolutely fell in love with it. So you start doing solo and ensemble competitions, and then lo
right.
and behold, you end up getting a one, right? And you're like, I remember I was like, how did they gave me a one?
All right.
Right, because I didn't even realize that it was even something that I was good at.
Well, you do have a beautiful voice. I mean, come on. Like, I'm sure even as a young guy, the quality was there, and
Yeah,
you just, and I think so many of us find our voice in that way, right? A choir director, a music director, maybe a musical theater director is like, hey, that sounds pretty good. Or even like before you get to, bring it to school, somebody in your family, like you said, your mom, or
yeah,
I think the way that I found my operatic voice as opposed to my choir voice was kind of imitating like Mario Lanza and
yeah.
like the three tenors and stuff like that. And I was just like, and people were like, that's actually pretty good. And I was like, I'm just kind of messing around. But
Right.
I mean, I think that's all how that's often how we find our voice as it was. And then we learn about the technique, and we learn how to shape the vowels and make it sound operatic and support and all these kinds of things, which we'll get into in later episodes. But
Yeah. Well, no, you say two
yeah,
really important things, right? There is a difference between a choral voice and an operatic voice.
yeah, I
And
mean,
I
two
think
different goals, right?
I said this to a student of mine today in a lesson. I said, listen, you're not going to sound operatic on accident. It is
Right,
something that you have to be purposeful about and intentional about. And
sure.
so somewhere along the way, somebody, like you said, encourages you to start experimenting and trying some different things with your voice and seeing what you can unlock. But yeah, you are sort of born with the instrument that you have.
Sure.
And so I think anybody can learn to sing technically proficient, but it
Hmm.
really is sort of discovering and unlocking like what type of instrument do you have.
Yeah.
So hopefully along this journey with this podcast, we're going to, like you said, talk about a bunch of different
So
things.
yeah, so let's talk about how we came up with this name, which I love
Oh yeah,
for so many reasons.
between
But
the notes.
between the notes, right? So the idea, I think, was born out of. Remind me again who you heard it from the first time.
Well, so I think in your quest of singing, we start talking about different ingredients and different elements of what makes beautiful singing beautiful.
Yeah,
And the word legato always comes up, right? That's a
can
thing
never
that
have
people,
enough. I mean,
right.
almost never have enough, right?
Unless the composer writes otherwise. But if we're
Yeah,
shooting for beautiful line in
yeah,
whatever it is that we're singing, legato is what we want. And I think I had heard that word so often, and I had heard, connection. I had heard
sure.
other words to sort of help to describe it, but it wasn't until Bryan Garman, who was a coach conductor that I worked with for my debut at Seattle Opera when I sang
Hmm.
Germont La Traviata there in 2009. He stepped in to conduct, but at the time he was the director of the Young Artist Program. with Peter Cazares. The two of them were heading up the Seattle Opera Young Artist
Okay.
program. And he talked about the importance of legato. And
Sure.
he talked, to define that, he mentioned what happens between the notes, right? It's like how you get from one pitch to the next pitch. What are you doing between the notes? And I was just like, absolutely, that's it.
Right.
Because you cannot use this to try to create individual pitches, right?
Well, not well, not
yeah,
effectively,
right.
not beautifully.
But,
let's
you know,
say.
so often people try to articulate the notes in the throat, and it's just like no. So really focusing on what's happening between the notes, and there's a lot of stuff that can happen between the notes, and that's, I think, the gist of this podcast.
Sure, and I think the airflow between, keeping the air flowing between the notes and through the consonants and vowels are kind of easy. That's a no-brainer, right? But thinking about having it move through and liquid consonants and all this stuff we're going to get into later episodes. But just a little background of where the name came from and what it means to us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about my personal journey with singing and performing on stage. I was born without my right hand, as you know, but to introduce everyone to me, as I started to pursue performing, in high school, it was never an issue. And in college, never an issue. And I did my first summer training program, Opera in the Ozarks, during the summer between my sophomore and junior year of college. And at the time, the artistic director there was a man named Carol Freeman, who had a pretty extensive performing career as a tenor. Mm-hmm. And he was stage directing a show we were doing. I was doing Dr. Bartolo in The Barber of Seville. That was my first role that I ever sang with orchestra.
Right. Love
there
it.
at Opera in the Ozarks. And he pulled me aside one day and he said, "Hey, listen, has anyone ever talked to you about getting a prosthesis?" And I was like, oh, well, earlier in my life, I had had a variety of different prosthetics from the time I was 6 months old until, throughout junior high. And
right.
I hated them. I never felt like they had anything beneficial to offer. It was just, I felt more like myself without it. But anyway, his point was, it's like, look, it might at some point be necessary for you to get a prosthesis so that people feel more comfortable hiring you. Mm-hmm. And then he said, but then once you start singing everywhere, it probably won't be an issue. Mm-hmm. And I think I was 20 years old or 19 years old, something like that during that time. And I just remember it being like, oh, okay. But no big deal, right?
Sure.
Fast forward to when I first signed with my first manager at Columbia Artist Management. They set up one of those big auditions where you sing for 15 different people in one audition.
Right.
And there were a bunch of people over from Europe. And I ended up getting offered a Fest job. And it was a pretty prominent company over in Germany. And they said, we'd love to hire him for a Fest as long as he has a prosthesis. And at the time, I didn't have one.
Right.
And that sort of shocked me. I was like, wait a minute, they're only going to hire me if I have a prosthesis? Mm-hmm. And then so I worked my tail off trying to find a benefactor that could help me afford one because they are quite expensive.
Right.
And along that same time, I'd even auditioned for a company here in America, a smaller regional company, for the role of Figaro in The Barber of Seville. Okay. And I remember I walked in and sang Largo a Factotum as well as I could. And the artistic director said, "Listen, Weston, I don't know if I've ever heard a better Largo Factotum in my entire life. Yeah. But how am I going to hire you to sing the role of Figaro with one hand?"
Ouch.
And I was like, well, I've already sung the role on tour with this company. And I took my jacket off and threw it over my arm. And I was like, look, I use my arm as another hand. But it was interesting to me to this was just my own personal journey, but I can only imagine others with whatever disability or difference, or, whatever it might be, to get past this belief system of no. For this role, we can only hire this, or for this, we have to have him look like this, or her look like that. And it's just so, I struggled with that. And for a long time, wore a prosthesis to everything I did, which was incredibly uncomfortable. Yeah. I think we are trying to find our true, authentic selves when we step onto stage. And I was always adding this additional thing to me so that I could look like what other people thought I should look like, or at least that's what
Yeah, I think the irony is you've told me many times about how stage directors are like, I would love to use this as part of your character for
Oh yeah.
sharpness or
Oh yeah.
for whatever the role may be. I mean, there's lots of ways, in
The
war or
Oh
whatever,
yeah, I
for
always try to
sure.
find a reason, a backstory for the characters that I perform. But yeah, the first time that happened, I was in Toledo Opera, and
Hmm.
I was singing one of my first sharplesses in Madame Butterfly, and the
Right.
director was like, "What would you think, Helena Bender?" She said, "What would you think about singing sharpless without the prosthesis?" And I was like, "I love that idea,
Yeah,
yeah."
sure.
And it was like you said, right? Maybe Sharpless was in the war and he lost his hand. That's why he has the desk job,
Right.
and so then Opera News came to review it, and it was like, despite his own physical difference, Weston was born without his right hand. He was
Yeah.
still able to sing with beautiful lyricism, and it was just like
As if that
what.
was going to get in the way, right? I mean, and
But
these anyway, I mean, again,
yeah, I say this only to be as free and transparent as
sure,
possible, and to letting people know that we all have our own differences, our own struggles, our own hurdles,
absolutely.
in performing. But I will tell you that COVID gave me an opportunity to sort of reset and step back and
Hmm.
say, all right, listen, if the goal is to present my authentic self, I want to try to really find reasons for any character that I portray so that I can walk out on stage and feel free to be who I am. And ever since I made that decision, I think things have gone really, really well in a good
Absolutely.
direction.
And I love that. And I think, as you said, whatever disability or whatever insecurity that we think that we have, being an artist and being a singer is where you can just embrace that and offer yourself as, here I am. I'm here to sing for you, by the way. This is about beautiful singing at the end of the day, and at least it should be. I mean, I'm not saying that the acting and that's not part of it.
Right?
But I mean, there's oratorio, there's all kinds of places that we can sing with our voice and our whole person, I guess, is
Yeah.
what I'm getting at here.
Well, sure.
And nobody's perfect, and we all have our things, and
Well, and speaking
yeah.
of, I know you've talked about the struggle you had with like early on, of course, as a tenor, right? You had like a kind of
Yeah,
really, really strong success, but you didn't really have the technical, or you didn't feel like you needed to go back to school and
I
kind of.
didn't. I mean, I had a technique. It was not the technique that was. I just didn't give me longevity. Didn't give me in my career. But yeah, I had a lot of early success with competitions and things like that in undergrad. And then when I finished, it kind of went. I went through a lull. I mean, competitions in New York that I had gotten honorable mention or even like
Right.
a place in, I wasn't making it to the finals anymore, and I was like, "What's going on here?"
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's when I went on my journey, and it was a really hard decision to leave my first teacher, Phil Fromeyer at Loyola. He was unbelievably generous with his time and with his efforts and everything. But at some point, if you're not making the progress, and you have to kind of rely on your team of people who know kind of the game and what's going on, and I had to just trust them and say, okay, well, I'm going to switch teachers. And that's how we met, right? Because I went to Steve Smith
Yeah.
and was able to get a couple lessons with him, and then go to Aspen, and
That's right.
that's where we met.
That's right.
Yeah,
Let's take this time to thank the teachers that we've had. So for me, I started off at Southwestern University and I studied with a man named Gerald Dolter, who
yeah,
really inspired and motivated me to pursue this career, alongside Kenny Shepard, who was the director of choral activities. But I sort of had an interesting undergraduate where I was 2 years at Southwestern, 2 years at Texas Tech, then a
hmm,
year singing with the National Opera Company, went back to finish my degree and study with Kenny Shepard when I went back to Southwestern. Then I went on to Indiana University where I studied with James McDonald and spent a summer intensively studying with Giorgio Tozzi, which was
amazing.
one of the
I'm
most
sure.
amazing summers I've ever had.
Yeah,
And then that led me to the Juilliard School, where I did meet and study with Stephen Smith.
right.
And like you said, that's how we got to meet when we were out at the Aspen Music Festival and School
Sure.
during the summer. And then I moved from him on to Stephen King, who I currently still study with.
Hmm.
So you mentioned Phil Fromeyer. You moved from Phil Fromeyer to Stephen
Right,
Smith, and
Stephen
then
Smith, and then it was really tough. I mean, I learned a lot from Stephen Smith. It just
oh,
was
sure,
hard because I couldn't get an every week lesson in New York because
it's impossible. Yeah.
he's just so much in demand, and it's expensive,
Oh, sure.
which led me to audition for Academy of Vocal Arts in Philadelphia, and I was able to take some lessons with Bill Schumann before that for the audition, in preparation for that, and then I got in as tuition free, and so that kind of helped take care of a huge part. I mean, it's not cheap to study to become an opera singer. These summer programs are not cheap, and some of them are better than others. And going to Europe is definitely something that you should do. But again, you have to trust, you have to know somebody who knows somebody who can say, this is a program worth going to. Just because they're giving you scholarship, you still got to get yourself there. You've got to pay to eat. You've got to pay for accommodation, all this kind of stuff. But anyway, just kind of getting back to that. Bill Schumann, kind of synthesized all the parts of the technique that I had learned from all the different teachers, and quite frankly, rebuilt my confidence in a huge way. He just was like, for the first 6 months of our singing together, he was like, please just take a breath and sing. Don't overcomplicate things. You're so tied in knots. And, that was not the whole thing. Obviously, then, I studied with him for 13 years. So I learned quite a bit from him over that time. But at first, we had to rekindle my love of singing and the feeling of why I got into it in the first place, right? And
speaking of, now we have the opportunity to pass along that knowledge with the students that we teach.
Absolutely,
right? And I think that you nailed it, right? It's like synthesizing all of the different ingredients from the teachers that we had. I remember when I was an associate instructor at Indiana University as a graduate student, it was the first time that I was teaching voice. And it was like this cool moment where you realize it's like all of the information that you've learned from your teachers and the experience you've had on stage, combined with your own personal beliefs and thoughts about what you're hearing from the student standing in front of you. And then you get to offer advice, technical advice on how to help them to find their own love for singing and their own voice.
Not to go, just one last thing maybe is that there's so many different things about a teacher, right? You need personality. Is your personality click? There's the knowledge. How much expertise does that teacher have? What's, the working with different voice types and all this, the knowledge of the repertoire. So many wonderful things that we are going to get into, really dive deep and dig in there in these next couple of episodes. Maybe we should talk just a little bit about our Singer's Handbook. I think it's going to be fun.
I think the next many episodes is going to be essentially a Singer's Handbook, everything you need to know about auditioning. So we're going to cover topics like what to look for in a headshot, how to create and write your own resume, how to write your own biography, both a long one and a short one, right? How to self-tape and what's some good recording equipment that you might look at buying. And then eventually getting into how to, find those live auditions, turning those opportunities into performances.
Yeah, it's kind of like Opera 101, right? Singing audition 101 is maybe a better way to put it. Auditioning 101. Yeah. Well,
listen, please like and subscribe our videos because I guarantee you we've got some information that's going to help you along the way.
And a lot of fun.
We hope.
See you soon.
Thanks for hanging out with us on Between the Notes. Make sure you hit that subscribe button.
And join us next week for more behind-the-scenes stories, laughs, and operatic gold coming your way.